Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and we welcome you to a very special night, the inaugural dinner in the first ever class of the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame. To begin our ceremonies tonight, I would like to introduce to everybody the chairman of your St. Louis Blues, Tom Stillman.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to join us for such a special night in blues history. Over the last few years, we've engaged in sort of an extended process to try to figure out the best way to honor the legends who helped build the blues organization over the years. And that process has now resulted in the creation of the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame. Our Hall of Fame will honor those individuals who have played pivotal roles in developing the culture of the blues and the rich history of the blues organization. From where we started in 1967 with Scotty Bowman at the old arena to where we are today at Enterprise Center, this organization has been built by just extraordinary people, extraordinary individuals, people who embody excellence and great character. And just to expand that way, I mean, that's really what this franchise is made up of. You know, that's what our legacy is. It's not just, some entity. It really is the people who came before us, what they did, what they meant to the organization, what they meant to the community, and how that all comes together for our legacy and past, and how it serves as a foundation for how we go forward. Tonight we're going to honor our first class of 15 individuals, each of whom played just such a pivotal role. And over the years, we've been privileged to witness their contributions, which have been extraordinary. Scotty Bowman, stepping in behind the bench as a head coach at 34 years old, to lead the Blues to the Cup final 3 years in a row in the club's first season, and then just go on to be the greatest coach in NHL history. The incredible scoring touch that Red Berenson and Gary Unger showed night after night at the old barn, leaving their mark not only with their scoring, but also with their durability, playing night after night. A maskless Glenn Hall, acrobatically defending the net in the early years. It's just kind of hard to comprehend that today. The fearless play of Bob Gassoff, the leadership of Barclay Plager, who laid a foundation for what the Blue Note means to all of us today, especially those who wear it on the ice. The dedication and commitment shown by Bobby Plager in more than 50 years with the Blues organization. And I know we all miss Bobby tonight. Federko to Sutter, the unstoppable scoring duo of the 70s and the 80s. The legendary Dan Kelly, bringing the game to life for fans in St. Louis and really fans across the whole country. MacInnis and Pronger, two of the best defensemen in NHL history, wearing the Blue Note as teammates. Can you imagine? Wow. And one of the greatest goal scorers in NHL history, the one and only Brett Hull. Now, of course, none of this would have been possible if not for the foresight, the vision, the determination of the Solomon family back in the 1960s. Our ownership group, with Jerry here tonight, and the entire Blues organization, salute Sid Jr. and Sid III for all they did to bring the Blues to St. Louis. We would not be here without their enterprising, I mean, the risks that they took, the things that they did to make sure that we had the Blues here, and the way that they went out on a limb. We really stand on their shoulders as we stand on the shoulders of all of our honorees. So over the last 50 years, the organization has seen record-breaking performances, Hall of Fame players and coaches, unforgettable triumphs, just miraculous comebacks, all-star games, Winter Classic wins, and our first Stanley Cup. I am immensely proud of the St. Louis Blues franchise, what it has accomplished over the years, and where it stands today. And I am so pleased that tonight we can honor some of the people who played such a role, such an important role in getting us where we are today. So thank you and enjoy the evening.
Inside the walls of the Enterprise Center, you can feel their presence. When the Blues take the ice, you can see their influence. When you celebrate with your fellow fan, you share in what they helped build. For more than 50 years, we have witnessed the formation and evolution of one of hockey's most unique franchises. It started with a family's vision.
I just think the greatest name in the world is we'll just call them the St. Louis Blues.
The early teams were comprised of some of the game's all-time greats and most colorful personalities. They introduced us to the sport, captivated our spirit, and showed us how to be a Blue. Over the years, many of them left their mark on the blueprint we use today. Players, coaches, and managers whose commitment molded the shape of our note, whose passion is woven into the fibers of the sweaters we so proudly wear.
To Hunter, who shoots, block, Winken,
Now we pay tribute to those that so proudly represented our city and our team and turned St. Louis into a powerful hockey market.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, officially, and welcome to one of the most amazing and special nights for the St. Louis Blues. Tonight, we introduce you to the very first ever, the inaugural class, as we finally kick off the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame. To all of you here in the audience at the MAC, thank you for being here. The majority of you are season ticket holders, the lifeblood of our great organization. We thank you for your dedication and your patronage to the St. Louis Blues. And for the sponsors that have joined us here tonight as well, we couldn't do this without you as well. Thank you all for being here. We'd like to give a big hello as well to everybody tuning in on Bally Sports Midwest, the app, as we could only fit about 400 people in this amazing room here at the downtown MAC. But we could pack 18,000 plus at Enterprise Center. So many people wanted to be a part of this. So Bally's, we appreciate you helping share this with our St. Louis Blues fans. My name's Chris Kerber. Glad to be with you tonight. I manage things on the radio side. The guy to my right is the great TV voice of the St. Louis Cardinals, John Kelly. And John, are you ready to go?
That would be the St. Louis Blues, but, you know.
What did I say?
Cardinals. It's all right.
I meant the Blues. Yeah.
Close.
Right off the bat, I'm on a roll. John, you look out here, we see everything, we see the fans, we see the people. We were downstairs in the VIP room, and you're watching all the different interactions and the reunions that happen. what exactly were you thinking, knowing that you were around in these early days of the St. Louis Blues?
Well, what I was thinking, Chris, and my dad came here in the second year of the Blues in '68, is that I'm in the presence of Blues royalty tonight, right? This is Blues royalty here in this room tonight. And it's awesome to be here. And this Hall of Fame induction is a long time coming, and I know that so many fans and so many sponsors and Blues personnel are so happy to be here tonight, and I'm just honored to be here. I've never been more excited to be in this room since I had my wedding reception here in 1994 with my lovely wife, Jennifer. So, yes. So it's great to be back here, Chris.
That is an awesome reason to be back. We're sitting here at dinner and watching three Hockey Hall of Famers here, Al MacInnis, Brett Hull, and Chris Pronger talking and sharing stories, and I'm like, holy cow, fellas, save it for when we get on stage. We're going to need some of those here in just a minute. Well, John, are we ready to meet? Well, before we actually meet some of these members, a couple quick people I want to make sure we thank here. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and all of them are probably going to be a little upset with me for doing this, but if I do not take a couple of moments and just acknowledge the work of Mike Caruso, of Trevor Nickerson, and of Randy Gersh and their amazing staffs to put on an event like this, and several years of planning that have gone into it. Congratulations to you guys, and thank you very much to you and your amazing staffs for putting things together.
Absolutely. They've done a wonderful job. And again, this night could only be better if some of these Hall of Fame inductees were here with us tonight. And unfortunately, they are not, as we know. But we certainly want to recognize their families who have come from far and wide. The family of Sid Solomon Jr. and Sid Solomon III is here tonight. Let's give them an ovation. The first retired number of the St. Louis Blues, number 3, in my mind, maybe the best fighter pound for pound in Blues history, Bobby Gassoff, his family here tonight.
Pretty cool to sit there, too, and look at Bobby Jr. sitting there with his college coach, Red Berenson, as those two are probably living some Wolverine days. But we've also got, and I've got the number right here, number 5 in your program, number 1 in your heart, 50 years with the St. Louis Blues, and we still miss him every single day, every time we go to the rink. But Bobby Plager's family joining us tonight.
And his older brother, Barkley, and Bobby knew this, Melissa. Bark was my favorite Plager of all time, but I love Bobby as well. But the family of Bark Plager is here tonight as well. Bark, I loved you.
And entering year 2 of the St. Louis Blues, if you turned on the radio, whether you were in the Midwest or even up in Canada, eventually the team needed a voice, and they went up to Canada, they brought this guy down, and there's still, to this day, I don't think anybody is better moving the puck from behind the net to a shot on goal in about 5 or 6 words, and you felt like you knew everything that was going on. And one of the reasons that I actually got into the broadcasting world myself, but of course, John's dad and the family over here, the great Dan Kelly. So tonight, we're going to introduce you to the other members of the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame. And we're going to do it for you in such a fun way. We're going to split it up into 2 groups. The first group we're going to introduce you to are the current members that are with us that have their numbers retired and that are hanging in the rafters at Enterprise Center. And then we're going to keep those guys up here, and we're going to add to it. And we're going to add the other members that are here tonight that is part of the committee that voted and the fans that voted were elected as members of the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame in the inaugural class. Are you ready to meet some of these great folks? Let's go, John Kelly.
All right, Chris. As a Blue, he was a 2-time first-team NHL All-Star, won the Norris Trophy in 1999, 5-time winner of the Hardest Shot contest, a Hockey Hall of Famer in 2007, and now a Blues Hall of Famer, Al MacInnis.
As these members come up, they're going to walk across the stage. Tom Stillman is going to be meeting them in the middle and present them with their uniquely designed St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame jacket created by Bespoke Apparel.
Congrats, Al. The greatest goal scorer in franchise history with 527 goals with the St. Louis Blues, a 3-time first-team NHL All-Star, a Hockey Hall of Fame inductee in 2019, and now a Blues Hall of Famer, number 16, the great Brett Hull.
Now, on the inside of all these jackets, they've actually put amazing pictures of these guys from their playing careers. I think if there's anybody's pictures I want to go through at the end of the night just to make sure I've seen them all, it might be Brett's jacket. All right. Well, how about the True Blue? The Blues' all-time leader in games played, assists, points, 4 100-point seasons, and the first National Hockey League player to have 10 straight seasons of 50 or more assists. That is an amazing accomplishment. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2002, the great Bernie Federko. And then finally, for this portion of the show, one of the only 2 players in the history of the game that won the Hart Trophy and the Norris Trophy. The other guy, of course, is the great Bobby Orr. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2015. One of the great media interviews to have, one of the best guys to ever watch on the ice, and my God, did I love watching the battles between him and Adam Foote and basically anybody that came in front of the net. Let's bring up the big Chris Pronger. All right, guys, grab your microphones, or the ones next to you right there. Come on down and sit in this chair right here, Chris.
Congrats, guys. What a... All right. Let's hear it for these guys again. All right. Chris, let's start with the most senior member of this group. How's that? Yeah. Mr. Federko, our colleague on Bally Sportsman.
Does that mean old? Does that mean old?
No, you're the most senior member, okay? You're revered. Bernie, what does it mean to you, not only to go in with these guys, but also you have a great connection to the history of the Blues with, of course, the Plager brothers and Gary and my dad. I know you didn't play for Scotty, but, you know, you're unique in that you have a connection to almost every guy that's inducted this year. And Bobby Gassoff, of course.
Yeah, John, you know, I feel very, very fortunate. I mean, this is a great honor, obviously, to be going in with everybody that is going in this year. I mean, this is a special honor for the St. Louis Blues. I mean, I came here as a 20-year-old. I didn't know much about St. Louis, and got to play with, right off the bat, with Red and with Gary. And I got sent down to the minors, which was probably the greatest things that ever happened to me, because I got to play with Barclay Plager. Bark was coaching down there, and he gave us the evil eye that you play it his way and you play for the team or you don't play at all. So it was a very, very special time for me to get to know Bark, and I still look at that Bark was the greatest moment in my life, to be able to learn under him and really be coached under him, and he was playing at the same time. He was a player coach. So just to be still in St. Louis after all these years, John, it's 47 years now. I mean, I can't say enough about the city. My wife and the boys have all been born and raised here, and it's been a very, very special time for us, and I can't be more proud to be a member of the Blues Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and you've always represented the Blues in a first-class way, Bernie, and we certainly appreciate that. What did it mean to you? And I know your first couple of years in St. Louis were challenging. The Blues were a rebuilding team, and they had different coaches. And, you know, Barkley was your coach, and then Red. And then it finally culminated really in 80-81 when your team had 107 points and went to the second round. It must have been really rewarding for a young guy and your team to finally break through in 80-81.
Yeah, it was tough. You know, to start, I mean, my first year, I ended up getting called up in February, and we ended up winning the division. I was only here for a couple of months. We ended up getting a first-round bye. We lost to Montreal in 4 straight games, and then it was a rebuilding. I mean, Mr. Francis did a great job rebuilding the team in a couple of years, and all of a sudden we went from not making the playoffs for a couple of years to being a contender. And I look back at 80-81, it was a fantastic year. We had a lot of fun. We were winning a lot of games. Of course, Mike Liut was standing on his ear, and we were scoring a lot of goals that year, and it was very unfortunate we didn't get into a Stanley Cup final at that point in time. And but that's how fragile this game is that it's very, very difficult to you know, get beyond what you need to do. And to be able to stay here and do the things that we've done. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I mean, I've been probably the only guy I started with the Solomons. They were the owners at the time. I've kind of been through every ownership of the Blues, and everybody's tried to win the Stanley Cup. And thankfully, this last ownership group has been able to done that, because I think that of all the things that have happened through my career, and I wish I would have been a part of it, these guys have all won Stanley Cups. I've not done that, but to be a member, even the broadcast crew, when we won the Stanley Cup, the Blues won the Stanley Cup, and I will never say that it was me. I look at Ryan over there and Tomer and Schenner and Chief. They won the Cup for us, and I still feel very proud that they did that for us. And thank you guys each and every night, really. That's what makes it.
Brett, I know a lot of people have asked you over the years about the trade that brought you to St. Louis. But looking back on it now, when that trade happened to now, could you imagine just the absolute love affair that you have had with the city and the fans have had with you, and just what it has meant for you over the years?
It's really hard to put into words. You know, when I was in the parking lot in Calgary, and Al was there with me in Calgary, and Jim Poplinsky and Paul Reinhart, and I walked into the rink with them, and I go, I've never really been a part of a trade deadline. And they go, don't worry, kid, you're a lifer. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, whatever. And so we go into the dressing room, and I get ready to go out and get ready for practice, and Bearcat, the old pot liquor, he comes over to me and he goes, Coach wants to see you. And I was like, well, that's no big deal. He always wanted to see me. He always wanted to bitch about something. And so I go into the coach's office and I sit down, and he goes, well, young man, we've made a trade. And I looked at him and I said, tell me it's somewhere good. And he goes, well, we've traded you to the St. Louis Blues. And I'm like, well, I don't, you know, it's America. So that's, I go, that's a good start. And so I pack my stuff up, and I get on a plane, and I come to St. Louis, and Susie Matthew comes and picks me up at the airport.
Susie's here tonight, actually. Yep.
And that changed my life forever because she is the greatest human being that ever came into my life, next to my wife. And for the next 11 years, Susie and we had a love affair with this city and the fans. And you know, Tom Stillman, you couldn't have said it any better. From the Solomons right on through, we can talk about anything we do. The fans in this city that have supported this team for 50 some odd years has made our franchise. There are bigger cities, stronger cities, all throughout the National Hockey League, but there is none stronger than the St. Louis Blues because of our fans. And it's special to be a part of sitting up here with you guys, and then we're gonna have another group of guys coming up here that is second to none, and without them, there is no Blues. Like, we are just we're just a kind of a offspring of them, because they are what made this franchise, and so proud to be a part of it. And I will go to my grave saying being a part of the St. Louis Blues is one of the greatest parts of my life.
Out of curiosity, once you realized that it's just a little bit more than just being in America, when Al decided to sign with the St. Louis Blues, did you have some great things to say to him about coming down here?
I don't remember if I did or not, but I knew that I knew how good he was.
He lost my number.
I knew how good Al MacInnis was, and when we talked about getting him here, and same with Prongs, I'm like, dude, we are good. With these guys, we are really good. And then they hired a bad coach.
Chief is not laughing right now.
Raise your hand if you didn't think that was coming up tonight. Just out of curiosity. Al, take us through your decision to become a Blue.
Well, I mean, Bernie and Holly touched on it, but I got to give, like, before I signed with the Blues in '94, previously the Calgary Flames and the Blues made many trades. You know, Doug Gilmour, Rick Wamsley, Rob Ramage, Rick Natras, Joey Mullen, it goes on and on. So in '94, when I was becoming a free agent, you know, I talked to all these guys. They could not say enough about St. Louis, the fan base, the city, and pretty much persuaded me to sign with St. Louis, and they were certainly not wrong. I mean, to be part of this group here tonight, and like both Bernie and Holly said, like, even the other day, a Calgary reporter was doing a little interview with me, and he asked me, like, what's with the St. Louis alumni? Like, what's with this city? And we all say it. It's the people. It's the fans. It's perhaps the best sports fans in the country, regardless if it's a pro event, an amateur event, an NCAA event. It's sold out. It's the golf event. It's sold out. So for me, it was an easy choice. I looked at the roster. You know, we had Cujo at the time, Steve DeShane, Holly, Brendan Shanahan, Bobby Batt, all these guys, and I just wanted to be part of it. And like Holly said, you know, we were a good team, and then what? No, but
There's always a little wrench thrown into the mix.
I need to drink more. But anyways, but all the great things that were said about St. Louis, and it's funny, my wife and I were talking about before we came here. We felt, I was 30 at the time, would come back to, come to St. Louis, try and, play 4 or 5 years, move back to Calgary, got a summer place, and 29 years later, I couldn't be more thankful to be still part of this organization.
Hey guys, I think the guys are a little tight up here tonight. So Jerry is going to serve us some cocktails up here. So where are you, Jerry? Come on. Yeah, the guys
Here he comes.
need to loosen up a little bit, Curbs.
Well,
so
Jerry. Yeah, there was no way that we were going to plan an event with Holly up on the stage without making sure that we got everything.
All right, thank you,
warmed
Jerry.
up.
He's got the order of all the guys, and we're all set, and hopefully you have a nice cold beverage.
Who's drinking the white wine?
The old people, the old guy. And not ashamed of it either.
Oh, God, I do not want to have a white wine. I know that, Curbs.
It's
All
getting
right.
closer, John. The odds are 2-1 right there.
You're right. All right. The great Bernie Federko.
Who's
There you
going to
go.
argue with Bernie drinking?
All right. Hey,
Pinot
Al.
Grigio, I wish I was in Italy right now.
Right. Hey, Al. Brett mentioned, of course, he played in Calgary. Was he just a shy little quiet guy when you knew him as a young guy in Calgary, or is he the same?
No, he first came in, he was pretty quiet. He knew his seat on the bus. He was after scoring how many goals in Moncton in 86 there?
50.
50.
Is that
First
all?
rookie ever to get 50 goals in the AHL.
There you go. See? Hey,
No big deal, right?
so,
The only one.
But I will, two quick stories here. One is we were talking about the Calgary days at the table there back in 86, and that's when Calgary hosted the Olympics. And there's not too many guys can meet this many years later and say they could watch Eddie the Eagle coming down the ski jump at the bottom of the hill, but Holly and I were there.
Dude, that was a month-long road trip.
For you. But
Jesus.
correct me if I'm wrong, Holly, and I told this story not long ago, too. Holly dressed his first game for the Calgary Flames for a playoff game in Montreal.
Stanley Cup Finals.
Stanley Cup Finals.
Hit the post, my first shot.
Can I tell the story?
Yeah.
So, where did Bobby score his first NHL goal?
Montreal Forum.
Your Uncle Dennis?
Stanley Cup. It's not Stanley Cup. Montreal Forum.
Montreal Forum. So sure enough, Holly and I get out on the power play. Holly's giving me the old,
Oh, really?
I'm open. So I whipped a pass across box.
I'm like, hey, get used to it. I'm going to be over here for a long time. Which didn't happen, obviously.
So anyways, I fed Holly a pass through the box, and he rips one right off the crossbar.
Patrick Roy didn't even flinch.
Didn't even move. So
He
Holly told
His
me...
ears are still ringing.
So you let the family down?
Yeah.
You didn't score?
I did.
Holly told me that story after
Well,
the
it's
game.
because Mark Eves was my roommate.
Mike?
Mike. What'd I say?
Mark.
Mike. See, I didn't even know who he was.
Don't worry about it, Brett. I had John working for the Cardinals. You're good. I set the bar real early for us, okay? We're good. Okay. Now, Chris, welcome to the program.
No, feel free. Feel free.
Well, those two guys didn't like a certain guy, but that guy, you're not here.
Yeah, I know. I was.
What was it like coming into a team that had these two guys already on it?
I was excited. It was, just between us.
Yeah, this will go nowhere, and the stream is doing great.
I got the call, and I was with one of my best friends, and I get the call, and I look, and I go, just got traded. Spun the top off a bottle of Crown Royal. Let's go. Let's have one. This is going to be a good time. I started going through the roster, looking at who was on the team. They had just signed Furzy, these two guys, Jeff Courtnall. You start going through the list, you're like, oh, okay. And then and then I was the Mike Keenan whipping boy. Yeah. It's a tough
All
first
comes
year.
back to the same thing, doesn't it?
It was a tough first year. Chief, I don't think you know. You were there.
Yeah.
In Philly.
Chief, you had to deal with that stuff too, didn't you? Thank God it didn't rub off on you.
It was certainly not the easiest year of my career, but it certainly helped me be a better player and teammate, friend, etc. There were some tough days, there's no doubt. I almost got in a couple fights with some fans in the parking lot, once, maybe 4 times, but c'est la vie, it happens. But for whatever reason, it clicked. We had a pretty good playoff run that year, and then after that, I started getting my shit together, started working out a little bit more. I hooked up with Al's trainer, Charles Poliquin. It's funny, I walked into Al's house, I meet Charles, I walk from here to the Flowers, and he goes, "You got a sore knee?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Walk back." I walk back the other way, he goes, "Do you hurt your left shoulder?" I go, "Yeah." Walking 4 steps. I'm like, this guy knows his shit. And, started training with him, and, it took a couple years to build up all the stuff that we're doing, but it certainly paid off because it was 3 years later I won the MVP.
So, Chris, as we know, you were traded for Shanahan, the owner's son. No, he wasn't. Just kidding. Was there a lot of pressure on you, though, because of who Brendan was coming here to St. Louis?
Just a little bit. I didn't realize him and Holly were kind of vying for the favorite goal scorer of the St. Louis Blues. Right. Apparently I didn't get that memo. That's what I was told.
I wasn't vying for anything.
I didn't get that note when I got traded. I didn't realize he was as big a star here as maybe he was, and I probably didn't come in with the right mindset in preparation, but I quickly was on the, we'll call it the Fat Club list, with me and Fierzy beside each other on the bike. He was on the treadmill, and then I was the whipping boy for a full year. Every practice, every game, every period, I was in the office. What were you thinking? You know I can trade you tomorrow to Ottawa, right? Like, yes, I know this. Thank you. I know this.
But
we
all understand that, right? Like, so you come and you got your mentor, like Al, right? Like the consummate professional. When I came here, Bernie Federko, just professional. And we would go out for lunch, and Bernie would teach me how to be a professional. And so Prongs comes, he's just a young stud, but he's got Al to lean on, and Al teaches him how to be a pro. And that's where we're sitting here, and I guarantee Chris Pronger will tell you right now that he would not be Chris Pronger without Al MacInnis. And I would not be Brett Hull without Bernie Federko.
And I would not be Bernie Federko without Red Berenson and Gary Younger. So it's that's what happened. Barclay Plager, Bob Plager, that's what it's all about.
Bernie, what were those early days when you were drafted and Brian was drafted and Michael Ute was drafted and a young Perry Turnbull. Perry's here tonight, right? A young Perry Turnbull at the highest draft pick the Blues had until Eric Johnson in 06. When you look at that scenario and what turning a franchise around was like, what are some of the stories from back then of you guys growing into NHL players together like?
Well, when we came in our day, and I don't know if it's the same now, but we came in our day, it was like Al just said, you don't say a word. I mean, you learn from the older players. They'd been around, and I think in our day it was really even special because we came when I came to the Blues, I mean, all the players from the Blues had come from different organizations. It was Montreal, New York, Chicago. I mean, this was an expansion team, so there had been a lot of players that had come from different organizations, which really helped us a lot. So everybody had a different story to tell, and we just sat there and we learned. That was our job. You don't say anything unless you're asked to say something. So you just went about your business. We always, I mean, it was really funny is that in those days, and we used to go for lunch every day. You had to go for lunch after practice on the way home, and you had to go, it was McDermott's up the road for us, and you had to have a beer, you had to sit there, and I mean, I was 20 years old, I loved it. I wasn't even old enough to drink, but I had a beer, it was a great thing.
You were old enough.
Oh, I was old enough. Oh, I'd had one before, maybe, but it was learning. We learned from the older guys because they were the ones that were full of the knowledge that we needed to know, and I think that we tried to do that. And I think that's the one thing about hockey, guys, is that we've all been that same way. We've learned. I mean, Brett comes to us. His dad is the great Bobby Hull. Brett came the most respectful guy in the world. He was the son of Bobby Hull. He didn't have to be respectful to anybody, but he was, because he learned the right way. That's the way you learn, and we all learned that way. And I think that's the way it should be. And all the sports should be that way.
Well, and that's why hockey's the greatest sport in the world, because we all learn that way. When I got to Calgary, you know, everyone I'd probably heard, Brett Hull, we're signing him, he's out of college, he just scored 50-some goals. It's like, well, I get there, and I go in the dressing room, there's Lanny McDonald, there's Joe Mullen, Al MacInnis, Mike Bullard, Jim Poplinski. I mean, these guys are seasoned veteran players. And so you just sit there and you shut up and listen. And that's all you do. Like, I remember sometimes I'd get a little hyped up in practice, and I go, "Come on, fellas, let's go." And you could hear Al from across the ring saying, "Shut the fuck up." He's probably, they're maybe a little hungover in the practice, and he's like, "Tell that young kid to shut up, or let's just get through this practice."
Well, I don't know if that's true, bro. Come on. But I will, you know, I mean, we've all, you know, taken advice, we've all given advice, but I think the biggest reason we're all up here is because, you know, we wanted the advice and we took advantage of it. There's a lot of guys that you know, like Chris said, I introduced my trainer to a lot of guys, but there's only a few that took advantage of it. And, you know, when Chris first came here, I mean, you could see the potential, you could see the hockey sense, you could see the compete level. And he was 19? 20. I mean, he's still a young guy. He's, I mean, wearing Barney underwear, I think, at the time. So, I mean, he just needed time. He needed development. He needed a little bit of guidance, but...
He had a DVD player in his truck. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Well, what was in the DVD player?
He's leaving it at that.
He was the creepiest human being I'd ever met in my life.
Chris, this is when you take the mic and start talking,
I used to ask him if I could get a ride home from practice.
What?
Al, when you were in Calgary with Holly, with 50 games or so, did you see that potential? I mean, the guy scored 86 goals in 91, as we know. I mean,
yeah.
Did you see it then?
Absolutely. You know, when Holly stepped on the ice, you could see he had one of the most natural releases for a shot in the game of hockey. You could just see it. And when we made the trade, a day later, I ran into the GM, Cliff Fletcher, and you know, he said he knew what he was giving away. But we were, at the time, at a point where we were close to winning a Stanley Cup. You need to give something good to get something back. And but I'm not sure if they knew Holly was going to score 70 or 80 goals, but they sure knew he was going to score 40 or 50, and he exceeded those expectations. But it's funny, like, I always say when some of the young guys, you know, you talk to them and you talk about Brett Hull, you watch him in practice and in games, like, never misses the net, you know. And I remember, you know, him saying to me, Like, if I can hit the net 5 or 6 times in a game, 1 might go in, 2, maybe 3. And you watch him in practice, that's the one thing that stands out for me in all the years we played together is he very seldom missed the net.
And I know he didn't miss the net very often in 1991. He only had 86 goals in 1991, folks, right?
How many empty netters?
None, right?
Well, it's hard to score when you're on the bench. God.
All right, Holly, that year, your center, Adam Oates, the great Adam Oates, missed 19 games, right? If he's healthy, how many goals do you get that year?
Well, that sounds like about 38 more.
Right.
You didn't even have
Dude,
any.
yeah, I've been telling you, Adam Oates was a joke how good he was.
You didn't have any,
Nobody has any idea how good this kid was.
and you didn't have any empty net goals that year, did you?
Well, no, I just said that.
Oh.
Well, you
Come on, Bernie, stick with the program.
can't score on the bench. So Gretz and me always have this argument. And I'm like, well, I missed your record by 6 goals. And he goes, Holly, I can't help it if you weren't good enough to be on the ice at the end of the game. I go, you are such a jerk. It's unreal.
Yeah, but we'll talk to somebody in a moment that realized you actually could kill penalties.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that in a little bit. Chris and Al, share with us what you both saw about the other guy in the Norris Trophy winning seasons and what that was like to watch the other guy perform at that level.
He won first, so I'll go first.
Okay.
He won first, so I'll go first.
Yeah, sure. Pleasure to my left.
I would, that too. I would say, as I got here and kind of learned from him in practice, off the ice, media, maybe a little bit about the media. I kind of had my own thing, right?
You're kind of one of my favorites on the media side.
Just seeing how more the defensive side and less about the offensive side. Some of that stuff I couldn't do. I didn't have the curve. I didn't have the shot. I didn't have the same stuff he had. But on the defensive side, how competitive, not from a physical standpoint, from an aggressive standpoint, and how he defended, how hard he was with his stick, how he got into guys, angles, and how he used his body to separate the man from the puck and take it and get going the other way and get on the attack. And you try to learn from, when you see somebody every single day, year after year after year, you tend to pick up things, and Al, I still don't know how people didn't bite on the fact that his stick was like this, and he was not going to go to his backhand, yet he still faked, and they bit, and he went to his forehand every single time. And I'm just like, how are they not biting on this? But just to see his consistency, and I think, as we talked about with Charles Poliquin and the training and everything, his consistency and his professionalism and how he attacked each and every day, each and every season, it rubs off on you as you're paying attention and watching how he prepares for practices, trains, eats. We'd go for lunch and I'd pay attention. I'm eating Eggo waffles and a bunch of other junk, and he's having bison and all this other stuff. I'm like, is that good for you? So you start picking up on this stuff and start understanding, all right, I guess I might need to start eating like this, and kind of change the way my body was from working out, from eating. And then obviously I was a fiery player, but then trying to keep that muted a little bit to maybe stay involved in the game a little bit further.
Dude,
So you're saying that was muted?
You said it right there. I mean, I played with Al, and I played with you. And Al was in complete control of his emotions. And there was never a time when someone would come down on Al where you thought the guy was going to beat Al. He would take that stick, and he'd put it right in his glove, and the guy would just drop his stick, and it'd be like you'd think the guy was having a stroke, right? You would slash the guy in the head and punch him in the face and get a minor penalty.
It was an accident.
And that's what Al taught you. Al taught you how to keep your composure, because you have no composure. Am I right, Al? Am I right?
I didn't do a very good job of that.
Yeah, you are really good.
I might wait one shift.
And I'll tell you this. I'll tell you how good Chris Pronger was. He would play 40 minutes in a playoff game, and we'd come in, like say it's overtime, and he'd take his jersey off, and he would have one drop of sweat right here. Everyone else, 3 shirts later, like gloves, skates, change everything, and he just had one little circle of sweat right here. That's how easy the game was to him. And I swear to God, you know when you're unreal as a player when the game is that easy. And both of these guys were sick at how good they were at playing defense.
Well,
yours smell a little more like Bud Light. But,
but no, there's no question. I've said all along, like, if there was one guy that I've ever played with or against that could play the whole game, regardless of how many overtimes, would be Chris Pronger.
Yeah, never change.
No
Wouldn't
question.
have to leave the ice.
And, you know, like, there was nobody more competitive than Chris.
Yeah, he's a mean.
But he could change the game in so many different ways.
Yeah, he's mean.
He could change the game with a rush.
He's dirty.
A cross check.
Oh, dirty.
But I say this all along. I don't know how many people remember this or whatever, but Chris is the last defenseman to win. I say this over and over. I don't know. Like, I'm just amazed at this because it's so hard for defensemen. But he's the last guy to win the Hart Trophy since Bobby Orr.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's
nuts.
only 2. And I said this earlier. I go, can you imagine how good Al MacInnis is? And Chris Pronger and Bobby Orr are the only 2 guys to win the MVP of the NHL as defensemen.
Crazy.
With all these unbelievable players like Al, Bork, Potvin, Robinson, Coffey.
Hey, Scotty, what was that guy's name? Lidstrom?
Lidstrom. I can't believe I never won the Norris or the Bing.
Or the Selke?
Or the Selke. A lot of times it was it was the sulky.
But you know what through all that, guys? The guy sitting in the middle here, I always refer to him as the true blue Bernie Federko, because while we're sitting up here and even the guys that are going to come up, they came to the Blues via trade, you know, or free agency or whatever. Bernie drafted by the Blues. And Bernie, you were a member of this organization for those 10 to 11 years that managed the team and was the superstar of a team through so many different challenges of owners, to the point that one time you signed a stick to somebody and had to go get it back and play with your own autographed hockey stick, you know, which is a true story, right?
True story, yes.
So, you know, just from your perspective.
Did the guy give it back, or did you have to take it back?
Emil Francis made me get it back. I had to ask it back. That was not good.
But those are some different challenges that the guys that played during those years with you had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's the business of the game. I mean, obviously, I mean, we never chartered. We never did any of that stuff. I mean, there were years when Ron Caron took over that we didn't even have a pregame meal. We actually, Susie Matthew, Brett, you mentioned Susie was arranging our meals after the games, after the morning skate at a pizza joint in Edmonton or wherever we were on the road. Is that, you know what, we all chipped in our money instead of the coming out of our per diem. We had to do it ourselves. So
they used to go on the road on Friday, and they wouldn't give you your checks. So they could keep them in the bank for an extra 4 or 5 days.
I think it was $15 a day meal money. I don't know how much interest they could make off that, but it was totally different then. It was a different time, and I mean, it's changed so much. And but the guys before us were even, you know, they had it even worse than we did. But we used to, when Harry Ornest, we used to take the earliest flight in the morning out of St. Louis, and that was the good days in St. Louis, not like it is now where you can't get a direct flight anywhere. But gosh, but we used to take a flight at 6 o'clock in the morning because it was the cheapest flight, and we would connect 2 or 3 times to get to the place where we were going. With Harry Orness, the one year we played in Chicago, we played in Chicago 6 times during the regular season. We stayed at 6 different hotels because we got the introductory rate at all 6 times. That's Susie will, it's true. But these were different things, they were different times, and you know what?
And you were lucky. My dad would tell me about the train rides
exactly.
from Chicago to New York.
But I will say this to Tom and Jerry are sitting there, is that, you know what? Thank God for Harry Orness, because otherwise there would not be hockey in here. He saved hockey in St. Louis, and I applaud him for that, because we have a Stanley Cup now because of that. So it's all good stuff, Curbs. All good stuff.
Well, and through all that, 1,073 points, and still the only player that's hit the 1,000-point plateau wearing the blue note.
You know what, Curbs, that still blows me away, because I left here in 1989, so I don't even know how long. That's a long time ago, and I still can't believe that.
No.
Yeah, 89.
I got here in 89.
No, 88, 89
I played
was,
with you.
I know, 88, 89 was my last year.
I got rid of you that quick?
Yeah, that quick. You opted for Otzi, and it was a really good move on your part.
It was Peter Zezel.
But really, no, it shocks me still, is that, I mean, it blows me away. I mean, you know what is really funny, because every time Dusty, my middle son is over there, or our middle son. Dusty was born on December 13th of 1983. I actually broke Gary Younger's record that night for have the most points for the Blues ever, and I still have it. This is 40 years, it's going to be 40 years now, and I still have that, which really blows me away. Scary. Well, every time I see Dusty, I think of that. Every time I see Ungie, I think of Dusty.
Every time I see Dusty, I remember me and Kelly Chase taking your 2 boys to WWE wrestling.
Exactly.
We brought them out to the old arena, and we were watching the old wrestling.
And how about this, folks? How about this, is you have Brett Hull. Brett Hull is the babysitter. When my wife and Bernadette and I are going out for dinner, Hully takes the boys out to WWF. That's a pretty good babysitter. Who can say they had Brett Hull as their babysitters?
Well, I tell you what.
It's only because I love Bernadette.
Bernie did have the opportunity, and I apologize because I've been leaning this way to this side of the room, but Bernie did have the opportunity, of course, to bridge the gap from the 2 groups that we're going to talk tonight. So let's turn everybody's attention to the video screens on both sides of the room.
Scotty Bowman, the winningest coach in NHL history, who set the tone and guided us to 3 consecutive Stanley Cup final appearances in our first 3 seasons.
It was just a break that decided it, and I think we were due for some break.
Glenn Hall, a fearless pioneer, a Vezina Trophy winner, and a playoff MVP, fittingly known as Mr. Goalie.
Shot and a save by Hall.
Red Berenson, one of our franchise's first true All-Stars.
The Red Baron was right there to raise the temperature.
The Redhead was a lethal scorer that once buried 6 goals in a single game, still an NHL record.
A shot. He scores! Red Berenson tying the record.
Gary Unger, an Iron Man whose wavy blonde hair was iconic, a 7-time All-Star who had 8 consecutive 30-goal seasons as a Blue. On behalf of the retired numbers, along with the great Dan Kelly and the Solomon family, we are proud to announce the inaugural class of the Blues Hall of Fame.
All right, let's meet the next group of Hall of Famers. The man who coached the St. Louis Blues to the Stanley Cup final in his first 3 years. Inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1991. All he did is win 9 cups as a head coach, the great Scotty Bowman.
It's a perfect fit. It's like he never left. Well, a two-time All-Star with the St. Louis Blues and a player that Mr. Bowman acquired in an amazing trade for the St. Louis Blues that brought not only Barclay Plager, but this next guy to us, an amazing player that is the only player still to this day to have scored 6 goals in a single game, and you can just picture all those calls and hear that ringing in your ear of Dan Kelly saying, Berenson, around Van Imp, and boom, he put in Red Berenson. John, I said, look here to my left, and you think of the amazing coaching career of Red Berenson at University of Michigan, and then what Scotty has done. Holy smokes, do we have some coaching up here right now?
We got some great coaches. It's I think Red told me it's the 100th anniversary of Michigan hockey. Is that right? Tonight? Today. Wow, that's amazing. All right, the man he was traded for, of course, scored 30 or more goals in 8 consecutive seasons, a 7-time All-Star, Mr. Ironman, Gary Unger, as they called him.
Is there any doubt who still has the best hair of the group? If you all don't mind, come together and all of you get in there. We're just going to have a group photo of you all right there. All right, let's make sure. It's a good thing you're tall, Chris. Okay, one more. Come on over. One more photo with just all you guys in the blue, and then we'll make sure you all have microphones. We'll send that out to the old Kodak hut, and we'll get those pictures back in a few weeks. Okay. Well, you guys mind passing? I think there's an extra microphone down. We need a microphone here for Scotty. We got one there. Red, you got your microphone next to you. Thank you.
All right, let's hear it again for Scotty, Red, and Gary Unger. Scotty, what does it mean to you to come back here to St. Louis, where you started your head coaching career? Obviously, you went on to great things, and now you're back amongst all of these Hall of Famers and wonderful people. I know you met your wife here in St. Louis, had some great times, some great success.
Well, John, you know, it's 50-something years, and it's meant so much. When I think back, it is history, and I came here from Montreal. I'd coached junior hockey. And the late Lynn Patrick took me under and said, you need a coach for the second year. And I was pleased to even get a chance to go in the NHL expansion. So that's how it started. And actually, I took over maybe a month or something into the first year, because he had other duties that he wanted to do, looking for players. We didn't get a lot of real NHL players. Each team in the original 6, they gave up 3 NHL regulars, and the rest of the players came from the minors. And I remember my first year here, I'm not sure if it was Noel Picard or it might have been somebody else, but it was in a preseason game, and we were playing an exhibition game, and Noel got nicked by somebody in the corner. And he came into the locker room, and the doctor at the time was Dr. Probstein. He was the family doctor for the Solomon family, and a wonderful man, never been involved much in any athletic team. And Noel got cut, and he came in, and first he wanted to freeze it. And Noel, in his broken English, no, fix. So anyways, he got stitched up a little bit, and the doctor said, just a minute, I'm going to put something on it. No, I go right away. But he said, you stay here. This guy's coming right in. And so the first year started, and I got in after a few games. And I mean, I've always said the St. Louis Blues, the first break we ever got was the fact that we had the player draft, and we got the 6th pick. We had to pick names out of, or numbers out of the hat, and it was 1 to 6. And we were always looking for defense, and we got a chance to get in the 6th pick Jim Roberts, who also played defense in junior, and then he turned pro and played forward. And of course, with us, we were getting to get a player that could play both, which was unusual. And then we had a tough start, and after, I think, 16 games, Lynn asked me to coach, and not long after, our leading scorer was a player by the name of Ron Stewart. He was 36 years old. He was a great skater. He'd won the Stanley Cup the previous season with Toronto, and we were struggling, and the Rangers wanted him. They were a real contender in the NHL. Bobby Hull was, I think, the greatest scorer at that time, but nobody could keep up to him. But Ron Stewart was a good skater, so actually, we did a lot of trades, and a good friend of mine, Emil Francis. So Emil was with the Rangers. He'd rebuilt the whole organization. They were one of the best 2 or 3 teams. So we traded Ron Stewart, and they were so strong. Red had, I think, broken. Did you break an ankle, Red, or your leg? Toe. So he didn't play much the first year, but he couldn't get in the lineup. I mean, they were so loaded. They had Jean Rattel, they had Kachuk, they had a bunch of good centermen. And, Red had a wonderful career with, when you look at where he started, and he I think Red was the top junior player in Canada. I really do. And then he chose to go to the University of Michigan. And I was tied up a little bit with Red because his team that he left junior, Regina Pats, they were run by a Montreal scout at the time. And I was in Peterborough, and in January, right around this time, we had an extra card, and Red was actually playing at the University of Michigan, and not going to play junior, still junior age. And I said, this is going to be a slam dunk. I'm pretty sure we contacted Red. Would you like to come to Peterborough after you finish your college year? And also, so anyways, long story short, the guy in Regina said, no, we're not going to give him his release. Otherwise, I think I would have had another championship. We lost the Memorial Cup that year in Winnipeg with the Peterborough Petes. But then I got started, and I have to tell a bit of a story on my wife, because we've had 3 boys and 2 girls and 6 granddaughters and 5 grandsons. And she grew up in Carbondale, Illinois. So I met her. I met her at a restaurant, but another time she was a nurse at one of the hospitals, and very friendly with the trainer of the team at the time. I used to get her tickets for the games, and I'm now coaching, and we're starting to get a little better, but I was just going out a few times with her. I said, if we win, for sure I won't be out. I'll be out quickly, but if we lose, and she had to get up early in the morning to go to be a nurse at 6 o'clock. So I said it might be a little bit longer. So she came from a basketball family. Her brother in Carbondale, Illinois. She later had a nephew that won a scholarship. And this game we're playing, and we tied 1-1. And she's sitting there with all the players' wives. They all take off, and some girlfriends, of course, and only one left, and that was Tommy Woodcock's wife, Claire. And so Claire turned to Sue Ellen and said, are you waiting for one of the players? And she said, no, not really. I'm waiting for the coach. And they never had ties in basketball, so she didn't know what to do. But so thank goodness she waited for me. And that's one of my best memories. But it was a dream season for us. The 2018 team that swept and went to the Stanley Cup and won it, they remind me a lot of our first 3 years with the Blues. As I said before, we got 3 or 4 regular NHL players. We made a lot of moves. The trade with the Rangers to get Red and Barclay Plager. Barclay was playing in Buffalo at the time. And when you look at that first year, I keep going back to Glenn Hall. We had a lot of things happen to us. Al Arbor had been a playing coach in Rochester. They won the championship. But what I remember the most about the 18 team, and they played a real good team in Boston, they were stingy. They made it tough to score goals against them. And that's the way our Blues played in 67, 68, 69, up to the 70. We were tough team to play against. And I think we got lucky because we drafted a lot of players in the expansion draft that had been on winning teams. And I was talking to Tom Stillman tonight, and I said, you know, there's a lot of good players in hockey, but there's also a lot of good players in hockey that know how to win. And that's what happened to our team in the Blues. Most of the players that we got had been brought up in the Montreal organization, or 5 or 6 of them. We got other players that had played junior and won championships. And we were just destined, because it seemed every time something happened, we took a chance on different players, and boom, they came into St. Louis. And of course, you know, the rest of is history with the team. And, you know, the Cardinals were the great team, and I think they said we chased the Atlanta Hawks or the St. Louis Hawks into Atlanta, because the fans just loved our team, and that's what I remember the most.
And obviously, one of the greatest trades ever brought this man to St. Louis, along with the late Barclay Plager. Red, what do you remember about the days leading up to the trade and the trade itself with our great friend Barclay Plager here to St. Louis?
You really want to know?
Yes. That's why I asked you. John's kind of blunt that way.
I was playing for the Rangers and playing a limited role. And I'd been traded from Montreal, and I thought I could play, but I was the only college player in the NHL at that time. So there was a lot of reluctance about a college player playing in the NHL. By the way, at that time, there was only one European player in the league. I think that was Ulf Sterner with the Rangers, and he was a nondescript player, but he was a European player. And there was one American player in the league, and that was Tommy Williams. So college players, American players, and European players were still strangers to the NHL. So nevertheless, I'm in New York, and I liked Emil Francis, and he liked me, but it just didn't work out. And so we're playing against St. Louis on Saturday night, or Sunday night. It was Sunday night. And Scotty has just taken over the team in St. Louis. And that night, I couldn't get off the ice. I was on the power play. I was killing penalties. I was playing with our best players, and so on and so forth. And so that night I had planned, we're going hunting. Rod Sealing and I are going hunting up in the Catskill Mountains, about 2 hours away. So we drove up there and we did our little hunting. We had a day off on Monday. And then somehow there's no cell phones then, somebody got a message to us that Emil Francis is trying to get a hold of me. And he's really insistent on getting a hold of me. And I was not interested in getting a hold of him, like we're in a hunting trip. This was a day off. So anyway, we're driving back, and between Sealing and I, we figured it out. Said, geez, you know, Scotty's coaching that team. And when he coached in Hull, Ottawa, and I played for him, I played well. And Frank Mario's the director of personnel. Remember that, Scotty? And Frank had been my junior coach in Regina. And it just seemed like it was a comedy of errors, but they had all lined up. I said, I'll bet I've been traded to St. Louis. And I was so happy. So when Emil finally told me, and he was kind of sad about it, I said, Emil, this is the best thing that's happened to you and me. You're wasting your money and I'm wasting my time. And it was true. And there was no agents then. And so, good. So I walked down the street and to Bernie Jeffreyon's house. He was living we lived in Long Beach. That's where all the players lived. And you drove 26 miles downtown to the rink in the old Madison Square Garden. And so anyway, I walked down, Boomer, I need my canoe. So I always had a canoe on wherever we went. I went canoeing, and his boys were using it. Jeffreyon was an older player. So I'm portaging the canoe back to my house to put on my old station wagon, and we're leaving. Enjoy my first wife, she's here. She's my only wife, I think. No, it's true.
I'm going to use that line sometime, Red.
Yeah, but the next line is 63 years, first wife.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Good for her. So anyway, I told her we're moving and we're going to St. Louis. And we didn't have any idea what St. Louis would be like. But I had played in the old arena, remember Scotty with Hull, Ottawa? And we came down, and Phil Esposito was playing for St. Louis then, the St. Louis Braves, I think, in the old Central League. And we played in there, and I walked out of there, and we were told to wear white shirts tonight. But if you would have worn, and we did then, wore white shirts into the old arena before the Solomons got a hold of it, it came out of there, it was black. And you had coal dust in your nose, and you had it all. And I'm a Western Canadian boy. I can handle anything, but this was terrible. And so I'm thinking, we're going to St. Louis. I can't wait to play there, but I hope the coal dust is gone. And so that was my first impression. And the coal dust was gone, by the way. They painted every inch of that old arena. It was the cleanest rink in the league, even though it might have been the oldest.
They did. They had to do some amazing renovations to that arena when they first were awarded the team. Now, you two guys, of course, as we pull in Gary. First off, Gary, I know
there was
that there's
no
probably...
cell phones?
What's that?
So there was no cell phones?
There were no cell phones at the time. That's where we're at. Okay. Gary, if there's somebody that probably didn't want to have to put on a tie tonight, I've probably told for Bruce Affleck, if you want to take your tie off, you're more than welcome to take your tie off. Up with that group. I know you've been...
I want to tell you the difference between the different eras of hockey, because here's a guy here, stand up. There's the guy. And the guys I played against had this coat on. There must have been a bunch of midgets that had this coat on. No wonder I scored a bunch of goals, because these guys were they were clowns. So, anyhow, here we are.
How you doing?
Good.
Curbs, he had that tie the first time I met him. That's the same tie he wore the first night I met him.
I know. And I was told he just slides it over his head, too. He's never had to tie it since that time.
You know what
you
I said?
You used to get fined a lot for your clothes, didn't you?
That's a clip-on.
I think
I
told him.
Unky, that's a clip-on, isn't it?
Can you undo this for me?
It's a clip-on, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
He doesn't know how to tie it.
I told him the first time they asked me about the tie, I said, listen, I don't go for the tie, I go for the win. I'll take it off.
There we go. I knew you were waiting all night to take that off. What was the news like for you when you found out you were coming to St. Louis?
I was really upset. I was playing for Detroit at the time, and Gordie Howe was my favorite player growing up as a kid. I grew up in Alberta, and when I was, I think, 16, Gordie was working for Eaton's, and I stood in line for about 4 hours to get tickets. I didn't stand in line. I sat over on a table watching the kids
Eaton's
go up
is a
in line.
department store in Canada.
What's that?
Eaton's is a department store in Canada for those
Oh,
that
you're
don't
old
know.
enough to know that. Yeah. And the Bay, yeah. That's right, that's where you could buy a
Hudson's
wolfskin.
Bay.
Anyhow, I was finally got up to see Gordy, and I was afraid to ask him for his autograph. And all of a sudden, as a Toronto Maple Leaf, I was sitting on the bench and serving penalties and really not playing an awful lot. I ended up getting involved in a trade going to Detroit. So I met the team in Detroit, and I got on the plane, not with the team, but by myself, and the 3 other guys that was with us. We flew and met the team in New York. We met the team one of the big hotels in New York. And Baz Bastien was the general manager at the time. Frank Mahovlich was traded with me. Pete Stemkowski was traded with me. And Norm Ullman went from Detroit. Paul Henderson and Floyd Smith. So we met the general manager of the team, and he said, "Frank, great to see you, great to see you. Glad you're with the team." He said, "Pete, how are you?" And he came to me and he said, "Hi, Norm, how are you doing?" And I said, "Wow, this is going to be a great trade." He says, "The guy doesn't even know my name." So anyhow, I go to Madison Square Gardens, and the chalkboard is up there, and I'm playing center with Gordie Howe and Frank Mahovlich. That was my line. So it was pretty exciting for me to be able to play with Detroit and play with these guys that were my idols when I was a kid. So I really liked the organization. Gordie ran the dressing room, and it was a great time for me as a growing up guy to have their mentorship in the game. So when I got traded to Detroit, or when I got traded from Detroit, they said that I got traded for Red, and I said, "Oh man," I said, "What am I have to do when I go to St. Louis?" I said, I guess I'm going to have to score 7 goals a game, because he just got 6. So the thing that really impressed me was the tightness of the team. In fact, they were so tight, and Red was their leader and the captain and the main guy on the team, and the players were really upset that I was coming in this dressing room because Red was the guy. So it took me about 3 months. I had to fight Barclay Plager and Bill Plager and Bobby Plager and Noel Picard in practice to get the little bit of respect that I needed to get when I got into St. Louis. So I was afraid one time that they were going to bring his dad in. I was going to have to fight him sometime. But it worked out well. The fans were great when we came out of that old arena. And you remember, Red, when they were singing the Blues Go Marching In, and you could hear the goosebumps on guys coming out the dressing room. It was pretty exciting.
Scotty, a lot of great names tonight, and one of the inductees this year is Glenn Hall. How did you get him from Chicago, and why did they let him go? All he did is win the Conn Smythe his first year with your team. My goodness.
That was probably the luckiest thing we ever got, because in the goalie draft, we ended up getting, we couldn't get below 3. We were kind of unlucky on these lotteries. We couldn't get lower than 6, but we were lucky because we got Jimmy Roberts, but that was the last pick of the first round. Same in the goalie draft, we couldn't get lower than 3, so we got number 3. And the first goalie taken was an outstanding young goalie, Bernie Perrant, who later became a Hall of Fame player. He was with Boston. They had 2 or 3 other goalies, and obviously he was the number 1 pick. And the number 2 pick was a goalie that had just won the Cup with Johnny Bauer in Toronto. He was probably in the late 30s, 38 at least, Terry Sawchuk. And Glenn Hall is with Detroit. And I think Red would know this because he played against all these goalies. But when we talk about goalies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the 3 names that always come up are Glenn Hall, Jacques Plante, and Terry Sawchuk. Yep. And nobody can figure out, well, which, they each won different things. Glenn won a cup in Chicago. He won a cup in Detroit. Like we all know, he played 502 consecutive games, but after knowing Glenn a long time, when I talked to him, he says, Scotty, I didn't play 502, I played 712, because I played 3 years in the minors and I never missed a game. It was it's an amazing feat, but Glenn came in, and I know that what he really liked about our team is we had players that could play defense. We had defensemen. We had Barclay Plager played with Al Arbor, and Al had been a player with Rochester, a coach. Toronto would always bring Al Arbor up from Rochester. He was, in those days, teams only played with 4 defensemen. They had a 5th defenseman who would play if somebody got a penalty or somebody got injured. And so, you know, Al didn't get much of a shot with Toronto, but they always would bring him up from Rochester for the playoff run, because Toronto won those 3 cups, and Al was part of, I think, 2 of them, at least 62, 63, 64. Toronto won 3 straight Stanley Cups. And in fact, it's a true story about Al. He was so fed up getting called up to Toronto, and he never got into many games, and his family was in Rochester. And when he went to sign his contract, it's always 1-year contracts. The year before that he finally had enough going up and down, he put in his contract. He's a minor league player. He put in his contract that he could not be recalled by Toronto without his permission. I mean, that's saying how good he was. You know, they wanted him as you know, a mentor and everything. So he coached in the minors, and so we drafted, I'm not sure exactly what position we drafted Al, but he was, I think, 35 years old. And all of a sudden we were at training camp, and Lynn and I are talking, and he said, Al wants to retire. Al Arbor wants to retire. And he was a key defenseman at the time, because, you know, I don't know if people realize, we got Barclay Plager in a trade, so we didn't get him in expansion. We got Bob Plager because in the expansion draft, Rangers wanted to keep their team, and the fellow that Red mentioned, Rod Sealing, was a really good defenseman, you know, but they said, if you don't take Sealing, we'll give you 3 components, the Rangers. They said, we'll give you the fill, because every time they lost a player, you could fill with one, and we'll give you a minor league player, and we'll give you a young player playing junior in our farm system. And those players came out. The player that we got as the fill, playing in the minors in Omaha, was Gary Sabrin. The player that we got from the Rangers, who was just like not playing regular, was Bob Plager. And the other player we got was a really good young player, because we never got many young players in that era, was Tim Ecclestone, who had a real good career those years. So, you know, we got really fortunate when you think about our team, how it was built. But Al Arbor was a holdout, and he didn't want to sign. And then all of a sudden he said, I will come back. I don't think he was doing it financially, but it turned out pretty well. He said, I'll come back for a 3-year contract. And the money was around $15,000 to $20,000 a player, unless you came with a contract. And Glenn Hall came with a 2-year contract, $35,000. And Al he had played with Glenn, I think, in Detroit or Edmonton or somewhere. And he said, I'll be back 3 years for $81,000, $27,000 a year. Well, Lynn looked at me and I looked at him and I said, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So we did go upstairs and talk to the Solomon family. The father, most of the time, on big decisions. So we told him the story. He said, go for it. Don't worry. We'll figure something out. And it was, you know, we hadn't even played a game. There's no, you know, we had no revenue or anything. And anyways, that's how we got Al Arbor. But Glenn came the first year, and then his contract was up. I don't think there was free agency, because Sid III, Sid Solomon Jr.'s son, and I were running the team. He was on the business side, and he was a very good amateur golfer. And he asked me, would you like to go to Edmonton? And there's a big Canadian amateur golf tournament, which he said, you know, and then we can go and see Glenn. So anyways, we go out there, fly to Edmonton. On the second day, we were only there to see Glenn. Sid got upset. He had a couple of bogeys. He said, let's get out of here. He said, let's go see Glenn. So, you know, we're going up this country road, and we didn't know anything about it either. And we're looking for this red barn. And Glenn Hall is sitting outside his house in a rocking chair. And I think he knew we were coming because we called on the number, having a beer. So we stopped by, and first things first, we're looking around, trying to be nice and everything. Where's the barn? He said, I never had a barn. He said, I used that in Chicago 6 years in a row. They used to train 6 weeks for training camp, and Glenn said, I only need the last 2 weeks. So nobody knew, and we got taken by the same thing. We were looking for the barn, but he said, no, I never had a barn. I always leased my land. But Glenn came in, and you know, when you think about our defense, it wasn't, in the expansion draft, as I said, we had no Barclay Plager, we had no Bob, we got Bob in that fill, we got Noel Picard, but he was a Montreal farmhand, playing sort of like Al Arbor, not playing much. They won the Stanley Cup a few times with him, and then we were really fortunate because Red had been with Montreal, didn't play a lot, but they'd won the cup. But you're traveling around in the Stanley Cup final. You're getting to see what it takes to win. We ended up getting Dickie Moore to come out of retirement. He was a Hall of Fame player in Montreal. Doug Harvey was our coach in Kansas City, and his team got knocked out the night that we lost the 6th game at home against a tough opponent, Philadelphia. They finished first in the expansion division. Just to show you how close it was, Philadelphia, right off the bat, started. They ended up with 73 points. It was a 74-game schedule, but we had to play the East too. And the 5th-place team that missed the playoffs was Pittsburgh, and they had 67 points. Only one of the 6 teams was an also-ran, and it was the Oakland Seals. They took a lot of name NHL players, but they were on their downside. Most of the other teams, if there was an older NHL player, they'd rather take somebody a bit younger. So, I mean, we were, here's how fate, and I look at it again and I wonder, how could you be so fortunate? We went into the final weekend of the season, and we were a point behind Minnesota. I think we were just like out of the playoffs. I think Pittsburgh was about a point ahead of us. And we beat them at the arena in a real tough game. And I got to tell you another story. It's kind of funny. Glenn Hall was our goalie. It was an important game for us, the last game of the season. And the referee was Glenn Scove. And little did I know at the time, but Glenn had told me later, he said, he's a hang of a referee, which he was. But he said, he's like my brother. He said, I was like a brother to him. And anyways, Minnesota got they were winning 1-0 on the Saturday night, and they got a very, very cheap call against them with 4 minutes to go. And the manager coach of the team, I was talking to Tom Stillman about it, was Ren Blair. And he was a fiery guy. He threw a towel at the referee, and he got a penalty for it. And on the 2-man advantage, we ended up tying and winning the game on the first 2-man, and then winning it on the third. So now we move ahead of Minnesota. I don't know if Red remembers or not, but we both were leaving from the same. In those days, you only chartered certain times, and that was the end of the year. And we're heading to Minnesota, up to St. Louis, and so was the North Stars. And those players were so upset, and I mean, at what happened. And we went into Minnesota, and we beat them 4-1 in their last game of the season. That put us into a third spot. And the way the playoffs were in those days, one played 3 and 2 played 4. So we drew Philadelphia, and Los Angeles finished second. They drew Minnesota. And both of the series went to 7 games. We ended up we were ahead in the series against Philly, 3-2, coming to the arena to beat them. And we had them beaten, and all of a sudden, with 15 seconds to go, crowd was singing, they tied the game up. The guy took a shot from the blue line, Ed Van Imp, and Al Arbour had got injured in that game, and we had to play a young French defenseman that didn't play much, Ray Forte. He put his hand up and deflected the puck over Glenn's shoulder, and now the series is tied, and we have to go back into Philadelphia to play. And we had beaten Philadelphia game 1-0. Jim Roberts scored the only goal, and Glenn got the shutout. But then we seesawed back and forth. So now I'm in a quandary. We get beat. It's tied 3-3. Doug's coaching in Kansas City, and their odds-on, they're playing like a final game in a best-of-5 at home. And I just happened to take a chance. I said, Doug, you wait for our game to be over, because I was expecting us to win. And I said, we want to talk about the next series. Well, we lost that game in the second overtime. We're so unlucky, if you think about it. The player came over the blue line and shot the puck over everybody's head, took a bad bounce and went in. Now we got to go to Philadelphia. Called Doug Harvey. I said, Doug, this is a tough game, tough team. They were getting tough, and we were tough too. And I said, I might have to take a couple of guys out going in there. We need to change. We need to do something. And he said, I got through. He said, well, he was disappointed. They got knocked out. And in those days, you couldn't bring a player from the minors till the team got eliminated. So we got real lucky. They got eliminated. I said, Doug, we need to get a couple of guys. Yeah, who could we get from your team? And he was 43 years old. He had no idea of ever going in the NHL, and he said, I got 3 guys ready. He said, I got a good, big, tough, a good, strong right winger, Craig Cameron, my best goal scorer, Gary Veneruzzo, and he said, myself. I nearly fell off the chair. I said, he said, and I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll drive the 3 of us tomorrow from Kansas City, and we were going to Game 7 in Philadelphia to play in Game 7. And we went to Philadelphia for Game 7. I don't know if Red remembers.
I remember.
Couldn't get into a hotel in Philly. We had to go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Went in by bus to Philadelphia. We won Game 7. I'm not sure if Red got the empty net. Was it Red? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, we won the game 3-1. And Doug Harvey played 40 minutes. And Al Arbour came back and played 35. Doug was the first star. Al was the second star. So, all those things, when you ask me what I remember about St. Louis, I mean, how many good things can happen? Everything fell into place.
We'll be announcing next year's Hall of Fame class tomorrow.
Scotty.
For the Cardinals.
Scotty, I got to tell you that.
Well, Holly, you didn't think
That's a true story.
You didn't
because
think we
Bob
could.
Plager told me that story, that Doug Harvey came up and he played 40 minutes that game and you won the game.
Yeah,
he
we put Bob
was
down
amazing.
too.
Yeah.
He was amazing.
He
Harvey, he was, like you say, 43 years old, 7th game in a playoff series. Our team is down. We just got beat at home in the last minute on a fluky goal. We go into Philly. Now we got to play the 7th game. Glenn Hall saying, holy shit, I hope the sun comes up. Like he was really down. And Doug came in and said, boys, and Doug Harvey. He was great. And don't worry about it, boys. You just put your stick on the ice and skate, and I'll find you.
I got to tell that story, Red, because no, it's even better.
Tell it?
No, but Red will know. It's even better
What
because
time is it?
Glenn is a goalie at the time, always coming to me saying, "Are you watching me? I had a tough game the last game. I mean, I couldn't believe it, and so I'm I'm more nervous than him now. He said, you keep your eye on me tonight, because if I don't have it early, get me out of there. Well, our goalie didn't play at all in the playoffs, Seth Martin. We're in Game 7, and Doug's there, and I'm looking around, and I said, where's the trainer? Where's Doug? Oh, he said I don't know where he is. So I go in the bathroom. He's having a shave. He's having a shave about 8 minutes before we go on. I said, Doug, I got to talk to you. I mean, I grew up in Montreal, and he was the greatest defenseman of all time. I said, Doug, I got to talk to you. I said, the goalie we call him the goalie. He just come up to me, and he said, I'm just as nervous as him. He told me to keep an eye on him. He said, Scotty, don't worry about it. He said, I'll keep both eyes on him, but he'll be fine. And he gave up 1 goal. So that's the game.
I'll tell you, it's the coolest thing about this whole thing is we're talking about 1967.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I won a Stanley Cup with Scotty Bowman in 2002. That's how long he's been an unbelievable
And
coach.
Brett, you got to tell him the story. Brett, you have to tell him the story that we had a powerhouse of Hall of Fame players. We got down to Vancouver 2-0.
Yeah.
And who ended up killing a penalty when we got the first goal? Lidstrom scored from center ice.
Somebody got a hat trick with a shorty.
Bled Hall. And then we end up winning the cup.
So, no, I'm telling you right now. So, Steve Yzerman, right? He's noted as one of the greatest leaders in all of hockey. And we go down 2-0. And Dominik Hasek is our goalie, and he's shitting his pants. He couldn't stop anything. And we're down 2-0 at home, and we're about to get on the plane to go to Vancouver for Game 3 and 4. And I am a lot of you probably know, I'm kind of a pain in the ass. And usually I would be out of my gear, throwing my shit everywhere and yelling and screaming. But I understand that I'm in a little different situation. We got Lidstrom and Yzerman and Chelios and Robitaille and Larionov and Fedorov.
That's
it. And I'm like, how in the hell are we down 2-0 to Vancouver? And so I get my shit together, and I just put my gloves and my helmet up, and I sit down in my stall. And I sit right next to Larionov. He's right next to me. And we look over at Yzerman, and he's just kind of sitting there. And then all of a sudden he kind of looks up, and he goes, oh, I think I'm supposed to say something now. And it's like, yeah, you're supposed to say something. You're the greatest captain in the history of the NHL who's never spoken. And so Stevie puts his gloves and his helmet up, and he stands up, and he goes, relax. We are really good. He goes, we're going to go to Vancouver. We're going to win both those games. We're going to come home. We're going to win, and we're going to beat them 4 straight. And he goes, relax. and I'm like, dude, that is... And Scotty Bowman, the greatest coach in the history of hockey, never came in the room. He just let Stevie do it. And that's why, he's a genius. He understands. I remember when I first got to Detroit, I went in and grabbed a cup of coffee in the morning, and I walked in and started sitting down with Scotty, and we were chit-chatting. And it was almost time for practice, so I went into the room to go put my stuff on. And I walk in the room, and everyone looks at me. And I'm like, what? And they're like some of the guys were like, I've been here 10 years, and I have never spoken to Scotty Bowman. And I go, yeah. Because he doesn't have anything to say to you. Me and him have a lot to talk about. I go, when Scotty comes into the dressing room tonight, they're going to be all my ideas.
Hey, Gary, you know, part of this night and the first class of the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame, and we've mentioned it several times, is teammates of your alls and stuff that are no longer with us. So I'm just going to give you one word and let you take it wherever you want to go. But I'm just going to say, well, two words first so we don't confuse the two. But Bobby Plager.
Tough.
Bobby Gassoff.
Tougher.
What was it like with those two as teammates?
I jumped in a fight one time, back when you were allowed to have brawls and bench clearing things, and you're trying to hide underneath the bench and the trainer's trying to throw you over because you don't want to go out there, maybe in Boston or somewhere like that. But I jumped on the ice. There was a bench clearing brawl, and I jumped on the ice to help a player on the other team because I was afraid Bobby was going to kill him. So, you know, he wasn't very big. I think he could wear in this jacket, probably. But to me, he was the toughest guy that I've ever seen on the ice during the time that I played.
Red, let me go to you then. It really is neat seeing you sitting there at the Gassoff's table tonight and talking with Bobby Jr. There's just an amazing individual of itself. But what did it mean for you not only to be teammates, but then get to know Bobby and be his, junior and be his coach, and just the family side of it that you've really been tied into for so long?
Yeah, I can't say enough about it. Just when you're a little older, some people lose their minds, but you guys know now when you get older, you'll be as sharp as Scotty if you're lucky. But nevertheless, I've had a lot of players that had kids, and Bobby Gassoff was a unique situation. We lost him. We lost Bobby's dad during the summer. It was a tough time, obviously, and Diane hadn't had young Bobby yet. She was expecting. And so we all got to know young Bobby, and I think a lot of guys tried to help guide him a little bit and make him feel part of the organization and the game and so on. And so Diane would send him up to our hockey camp, and I'd have him working in the yard. And he could stay with us, but you got to do this work and so on. And so anyway, he'd come through our school, and I got to know him as a kid. And it's been great. And sooner or later, time goes by, and now it's time. Bobby wants to go to school, and he wants to go to Michigan. And this is true. And I told Bobby, I don't know if you should come to Michigan. I don't know if you'll play. And I can't guarantee you're going to play. And you hate to bring a kid there to be unhappy. Anyway, he comes, and he impresses our program at college hockey at Michigan with his classmates. But he, as an individual, I can't tell you what he did. Off the ice, so many good things. And then on the ice, we still have a Bobby Gassoff. We want Gassoff fan club that when things get rough on the ice, they remember Bobby Gassoff at Michigan. So it was... So he was a student, he was a player. He never got to know his dad like we did as players and teammates, and I don't think anyone rammed it down his throat, but he doesn't need that. He is who he is, and I couldn't be prouder of any of the players I've coached. I've coached hundreds and hundreds of players at Michigan and quite a few in the NHL and so on. I couldn't be proud of any of them than I am of young Bobby Gassoff, so good for him.
And I will say this, and I've said this 1,000 times to Red, if we had had Bobby Gassoff in 80-81, when we finished second to the Islanders,
we had a very, very good chance of winning the Cup. He was one of he would have been a total difference maker if we had had Bobby Gassa.
No question. We lost out to the Rangers, remember?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I remember that too. Like, even with these
Hospital
young guys.
Beck, we had Bobby Gassa. There's no Beck and there's no Hospital.
That's right, exactly. Barry Beck had our whole team on their heels. And that's the difference. If you're not tough, you're not going to be good enough. And the Blues showed it a few years ago when they won the Stanley Cup. They pushed everybody around. Nobody pushed them around. Scotty knew that when he came in as a young coach. Like, we wouldn't be having the memories that we have today if it weren't for Scotty Bowman knowing the game and how to push buttons and bring in the right kind of players and get them to play the right way. And, you know, there's not many players, and I'll say this for Scotty, he was my best coach far and away, but there's not many players ever played for him that can say they ever played better for any other coach than they did for Scotty Bowman. And that's how important leadership is. So for you folks that are very successful, or you wouldn't be here, and obviously you've had some leadership, or you've got leadership with you and around you, and it just should reinforce all of us how important that is. You can change lives, careers, families, so much with good leadership. And just think about it and do it.
And then to kind of pull that all, and I hope, Bobby, you don't mind me saying this, but I know your dad would be amazingly proud. The fans that grew up when your dad was here, and the stories that you've heard about what Bobby Gasso did, and every time you go into the arena and see that number 3, I can only imagine how proud he is to know how well that you've represented this country, defended this country as a proud Navy SEAL. So thank you very much. A couple more questions here, but before we wrap it up, and a couple more, you know, just a couple quick stories. Now, Scotty, I'm going to ask this, but we do have a game and face-off tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Okay, but it's because of you. And Jerry, couple of these guys need some drinks. So Jerry, if you're still around, maybe Slate. Here he comes. Big round of applause for Jerry there. It's about okay. It was because of a conversation that you had that you knew that this team needed a voice. And tell everybody about just the conversation that led to the bringing in of the great Dan Kelly.
Oh, sure. Mr. Solomon believed in baseball before he bought the hockey team. And the first year we didn't have an announcer. We were on KMOX, but we had different people. We had Jay Randolph, who used to come in from the TV station. Jack Buck, a story about Jack Buck. He flew in from the All-Star game or something in Hawaii for the NFL. He flew into Chicago one night. We're playing the Blackhawks. And he came up to me and he said, well, this is going to be a tough game for me. I only know 2 players on Chicago, Hull and Makita. They're not dressing. And, he could wing it. I mean, what an announcer, Jack Buck. I mean, he probably could broadcast anything. But anyways, after the first year, Mr. Solomon wanted to get a voice for the Blues. So naturally, he'd always be talking hockey with Lynn and I. And he said, who's the best who's the best announcer in the NHL? And and Lynn agreed to it. As we're kind of prejudiced, the number 1 has always been Foster Hewitt, who's been terrific. He actually did the 72 Summit Series at the end. But anyways, he said, we think Danny Gallivan is really the guy now. And he'd been with Montreal for 15 years, so he said, do you know him? I said, well, yeah, I was in Ottawa, and I got to know him because he used to come and he was at our finals in '68. He did the games back to Canada. So get me his number. He called Danny Gallivan, said, we'd like you to come to St. Louis. Gee, I'm honored, but he said, I got a young family and I've been here 15 years. And he said, so then Mr. Solomon said, how much money do you make up there? And he said, 15,000. And he said, oh, well, he said, this is US 30,000. And poor Danny, he said, you're breaking my heart, but I can't leave here. And so he didn't come. And then he came back the next few days and said, no, he asked Danny Gallivan, yeah. He said, could you recommend an announcer in the league? I know you're rated #1, but is there anybody else that I should talk to? Well, he said, I don't want to put somebody in that they're all good, but he said, there's a young man in Ottawa who comes down. He doesn't do play-by-play, but he's a host. And he said, Scotty would know him because he does a lot of the games for Hull Ottawa Juniors. And he said, his name is Dan Kelly, and he's with a TV station there. So Mr. Solomon said, you happen to know Dan Kelly? I said, yeah, I live in Ottawa in the summers. And I was single, and Dan was married to Fran, and I used to hang around with them. And I said, oh, yeah, I know Dan very well. So anyways, get me his number. He calls Dan Kelly up, and same old talk about it. And he said to Dan, you've been recommended by a lot of people, Danny Gallivan, and Dan wasn't very old at the time, so he said, would you like to come to the St. Louis Blues? And he said, how much money do you make? I think Dan said, well, including everything, and I do a lot of TV and radio shows, and I make $7,500. So Mr.
John
Solomon
makes
said,
8,000.
Pardon? So then he said, well, we're going to pay you 15. And so Dan didn't say anything right away. He said, but I have my family to talk about. My wife Fran. I think Fran's family was in a they had a little bakery in Ottawa, and they were all helping out. So he said, give me a couple of days. So a couple of days went by. Mr. Solomon hadn't heard from Dan, and he said, you better call him back. So I could call. I called Dan, and I said, Dan, I'm Mr. Solomon. Oh, he said, by the way, Scotty, I'm coming to St. Louis. Oh, I said, well, Mr. Solomon, that's why I'm calling you. Oh, no, he said, I said I'd call him today, but I'm going to call him in the morning. He said, it's a great place for us. So I talked to my family. We're all set to come. And so as soon as I got off the phone with him, I had to go upstairs to see Mr. Solomon, and he was all excited. And I said, oh, Dan Kelly's coming. He just told me on the phone. Are you sure? He said, why didn't he call me? I said, well, he's going to call you tomorrow, Mr. Solomon. You're sure of that now? I said, yeah. He said, what else did he say? And this was a joke that Dan gave me. Dan said, Scotty, are there any good Chinese restaurants in St. Louis? So I said, Dan, you're asking the wrong guy, but he was joking with me. I said, I've been doing a lot of work. I don't go out much. I'm kind of busy. So I went back and I said, Mr. Solomon wants. I said he wants to know if there's any Chinese restaurants, and it's true. Mr. Solomon said, you call him back right away, because he said, you tell him if there aren't any good Chinese restaurants. I've heard his tapes, and I said, I want them so bad, I will build one. So the rest is history.
Right.
That's the way they operate.
Yes. And our family thanks you to this day, Scotty. All right. I got two more questions. I want short answers because, again, we have a game tomorrow night, right, Curbs? All right, Scotty. In '96, our rivals, the hated Red Wings, play the Blues, and Brett's on the team, and Al, and the legend says you painted the Blues locker room to take them off their game. Is that true? Did you paint the Blues locker room?
I just got a text today, John.
Now, be honest, Scotty, okay?
Yeah,
I've known you a long time, all right?
I just got
Allegedly.
a text. And, in fact, I can show you my phone. No, my wife has it. From Al Sabatka.
Okay.
Wishing me all the best with the Blues.
Right.
And I said, Al, and I'm taking quite a hit, because I've been accused of painting the dressing room for the Blues and I think later Colorado.
Right.
And I said I had to explain that it was your idea to do it. And he said, that's right, I apologized, and I got to find the name. He apologized. I've already apologized. It was somebody connected with the Blues. So that's my answer.
Okay. All right, Brett. Is that a true story? Do you believe that, Holly?
What was the answer? Did he or didn't?
What I was worried about is what I was smelling in the dressing room. There's you could have painted it anything.
Right.
It didn't matter. Their team was really good.
Yeah, they were really good.
Allegedly.
Really good. That's why I went to Detroit, Scotty.
All right, next.
Hey.
And this might be. This
Hey.
might. Oh, Scotty. Brett.
Scotty.
Brett has a question for you.
That's why you wanted me to come there. It's, take us over the edge.
We needed
Needed
somebody.
someone to score.
Yeah, we needed somebody to.
You needed someone to paint the locker room.
Well, we needed somebody like
Needed
you
someone to keep Chelios in at night.
to develop. Also, Brett, I don't want to blow you up too much, but a Hall of Fame player, you were very instrumental in the development the first year because he was a rookie. Pavel Datsyuk.
Oh, my God.
So people can thank Brett Hull for the first year as a rookie. And we got him on the ice a lot. And I think Brett,
I'd get
Brett,
so mad on the
I
bench,
think-
and he'd look at me and go, Brett.
but it was a good combination
Mad?
because Pavel
I go,
was such
yeah,
an
but not
underrated
at you.
defensive player, and Brett was such an overrated
What?
defensive
Hold on,
player.
Hold on, what? What was I overrated?
Well, I have to tell you a story about your dad.
Wait, Scotty. Wait. No.
I'll tell you about it. Glenn Hall told me when they played with the Chicago Blackhawks, they had a super team in the 60s. They won the cup in 61.
Right.
They should have won about 3 more. They wouldn't play defense.
Because they had like Nestorenko, who
No,
was
they wouldn't play
useless.
defense.
Yeah.
They just ran through the game. They got to the playoffs. Stan Mikita got shut down. And so they were all at the bar one day at the Mount Royal Hotel. It was Billy Hay, Pierre Palat, Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, Glenn Hall. And they had a few. And Glenn said, we're getting near the end of the year. And I said, I just happened to mention this. I said, Bobby, you're only an average player in this league. And Bobby got upset and said, what the hell are you talking about? He said, you're the best offensive player in the league, and you're the worst defensive player. So he said for the next 2 to 3 weeks, Bobby went up and down the wing, paid attention to playing defense. So playing defense is not hard. It's a will.
Well, that's where all the dumb people
Playing
play.
defense.
Sorry, Prongs and Al, but the only people that play defense are the bad players. Only the good players play offense.
Allegedly.
I think it's only fitting to end the evening with our Hall of Fame class tonight. And Gary, I'm going to have you do this if you don't mind. But the most fitting way to end the storytelling of what has really been a special night of history and foundation building. But please share with us one of your greatest memories of Bobby Plager.
Well, I don't know. There's so many. Bobby was a unique character, and Bark. They were leaders on the team. They were along with Red. But they were always, something would be going on in the dressing room, and you'd hear Bobby over in the corner giggling and laughing because he knew something was going on. So I'm just new in the dressing room. I was one of the first guys to use white tape in the NHL. Everybody used black tape, Gordie Howe tape they called it. And they had a sock filled with baby powder in the, on a skate lace. And guys would tape their stick with black tape, and then they'd pound this baby powder on it to get it so the tape wasn't sticky. Then they would call in between periods, the the radio or TV guy would come down to the dressing room and see if somebody wanted to go in between periods on television. And the guy would come in and he was ready for TV. He was a black suit, beautiful white shirt, the tie, the whole thing. And he'd come in and he'd be talking to different guys. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of the room would fly this sock filled with baby powder and whack this guy on the black suit. And the black suit was just covered. And then he said, and then Bobby had run to Tommy Woodcock and he'd say, Tommy, get some cotton batting. We used to use cotton batting in our jockstrap. So get some cotton batting and that'll take that stuff off your shirt, off your jacket. So now the guy's he's got this jacket that's totally white, and now he's rubbing cotton batting on it. And it's getting stuck all over the thing. So now this guy who's got, nice dark tan and he's ready to go on TV, he's just a mess. And then they yell, hey, there's a phone call for you. Your producers want to talk to you. And they'd hand him the phone, and the phone would be filled with Vaseline. So he'd put the phone up to his ear, and now he's got Vaseline on it. Poor guy would leave the room, and he was just a mess. And Bobby would be giggling in the back.
God, I miss that guy. Yep, I really do. John, this has been an amazing night, hasn't it?
Incredible night, incredible stories, incredible people. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. Remember your Hall of Fame class, the Solomon families, Bobby, Barkley, Dan Kelly, Bobby Gassoff. Of course, we've got Al MacInnis, Brett Hull, Bernie Federko, Chris Pronger, Gary Younger, Red Berenson, the greatest coach of all time, and Scotty Bowman. It's your inaugural St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame class. If we could have a member from the family come up and have a picture taken at center stage, please. So we need Diana, come on up. Mrs. Kelly, come on up. Okay. Just over here, Mrs. Kelly. Guys, let's get one more picture and end the night the right way. Okay. Hang on. Where's Mrs. Plager? Come on up. Okay, we got her, and then Melissa. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. And where are, yes, we're just taking a big group picture. And we need the Solomon family as well.